Can Netflix become HBO before HBO becomes Netflix? And can radio survive without passion? This is episode 88 of Media Unplugged, the podcast that goes behind the spin to reveal what's really happening in media.
Media Unplugged with Tom Asacker and Mark Ramsey.
Welcome to Media Unplugged. I'm Mark Ramsey.
And I'm Tom Asacker.
Mr. Tom, can Netflix become HBO before HBO becomes Netflix? This is a really interesting piece from Barron's that I guess was inspired by something that Ted Sarandos from Netflix, their chief content officer, said half a decade ago, which is also known as 5 years, which in Netflix time is like an eternity. This is around the time that they were talking up the fact that they were doing all this weird streaming stuff, and everyone was saying, "Well, I'm getting my DVDs through the mail. You know, why mess up a good thing?"
Right.
And he said, our goal is to become HBO faster than HBO can become us. And the reason why that's so ironic is that in light of AT&T's acquisition of what is now called Warner Media, their intention is to build another over-the-top streaming service around HBO. So literally, literally now, HBO is on path to become, or at least in terms of its intention, to become Netflix. And what's funny about that is, you know, HBO has always been kind of this curator of tremendous quality, right? If you think about the number of new shows on HBO, there actually aren't that many, whereas Netflix has a new show every day, it seems.
Yep.
And Netflix doesn't have quite the same luster as being a curator of quality. But what's your take on this whole evolution?
I tell you, it's difficult to even keep up with. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out. And by plays out, I mean, who are going to be the dominant, I don't know, half dozen or so paid television services? It used to be, this all used to be fairly straightforward, right? I mean, content companies made TV shows and movies. Mm-hmm. They sold them to pay TV distributors who sold them to consumers. Mm-hmm. Now it's like everything is up for grabs. I'll give you an example. So I recently received a call from my pay TV distributor, which is my cable provider, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And they're trying to save me money and increase my content choices by having me play around with the various channel options. All right? Okay. This is the game they're all playing. Mm-hmm. They eventually did it. You know how they did it? How they saved me some money and increased my options?
How?
By having me get rid of HBO.
What do you mean?
Well, they said, look, if you get rid of HBO, we can reduce your cost and you get Sundance and this and that and this channel and that. I said, really? So what are they up to? What is Comcast up to that they're trying to get me to get rid of HBO? See, this is what I'm telling you. Who knows what in the world is going on with all these guys, with all this different content stuff? Because now, I mean, what's Comcast? Comcast has, who do they have? They have NBC, Universal Studios, DreamWorks, right? You've got Disney, who has Hulu, ESPN, Marvel, ABC, Fox Studios.
Well, Disney has a stake in Hulu, I believe.
Well, but they bought Fox, which had a stake, so now I think they own majority of Hulu.
They may.
Right? And then you got AT&T, who owns Warner Brothers, CNN, TNT, TBS. What's going on? I can't figure out how this is all going to play out unless...
And you left out CBS with their over-the-top thing, which is Viacom, right?
Right. They have Showtime and Viacom and has Paramount, and
it's literally hard to make sense of it all. It's like someone's going to listen to this and say, "You missed one little, tiny point that so and so has only 40% of such and such." It's right. Such a, and to the average consumer who knows infinitely less than we do on any of this stuff, they're just saying, "Look, I want a show. Give me my show. Where's Ray Donovan? I want to get Ray Donovan. Show me how to get Ray Donovan."
That's right. That's what's really interesting about all this. So are the providers going to? I don't know. I mean, I'm wondering, when do they step in and say, I create a disincentive to allow the other content producers to try to take your eyeballs away?
Well, I think what you're describing with that HBO move is the beginning of of people establishing their lanes, mutually exclusive from other people's lanes, where there's a minimum of overlap for certain elements, and people need to decide, do I want the package that includes HBO? Quite frankly, it's the same decision people have made ever since cable existed.
Right.
Do I want the package that includes HBO or not? Right?
Right.
That's actually no different from what people have been asking since the beginning of HBO. Do I want the package that includes HBO or not? The difference now is, do I want the package that includes, the CBS over the top that has Star Trek? Do I want the package that includes Disney's over the top that includes Star Wars? Do I want the package that includes Warner Media's over the top, which includes HBO and maybe DC Universe? It's kind of, we're moving from a world of packages where the channels are all commodities and your only choice is, do I want to get it through Comcast or AT&T, to a world where the packages are actually content bundles. And now you have to decide, do I want bundle A, B, C, or D, and what really do I value? I wish somebody would come to me and say, hey, we'll take ESPN off your cable box and take all those sports channels that you never watch off your cable box and reduce your rates significantly. I sense no one's going to do that.
See, that's what I'm talking about, right? Because Comcast can say, do you want this with HBO, without HBO? But they can't say, would you like to have Amazon Prime added to your offering? They can't say that. What they can say is, do you want internet?
That's right. But Amazon Prime can say, do you want HBO in with your Amazon Prime offering?
I know. That's
yes.
what I'm telling you. It's confusing as hell to me.
Yeah, it really is confusing. There's a channel called Shudder, which is an over-the-top horror channel that I get. I get it on Amazon Prime, and I also get it on Shudder. So in other words, I can access it either way, but I got to pay different fees for both. It's complicated. Don't ask me why. But it's just, it's like, well, do you want to get it on the over-the-top Shudder channel, which you can get on your mobile device, or do you want to get on the Amazon channel? The offerings are not quite the same, but they're close. But yes, it's getting more and more and more confusing, and you need a scorecard to keep up with all this stuff. But here's what I know. At the bottom of all that, at the bottom of that equation,
I know what you're going to say,
is the quality of the content,
yeah,
right?
It comes to creative output. I mean, that's the only way to sustain attention. Right?
That's
Isn't
right.
it? I mean, that's why Netflix went to the bond market and got another $2 billion
Although Netflix, let's talk about that for a sec, because it seems to me that Netflix is going to be increasingly challenged, because you've noticed, I've noticed, I'm sure everybody has noticed, that if you go looking for something that used to be on Netflix, it's not there anymore, unless it's a so-called Netflix original, that even now today, the majority of Netflix viewership is derived not from so-called Netflix originals, but from programs which began their run on largely network television. That's where the viewership comes from, and yet that's the exact content that's going to go away. I mean, the Time Warner content, if you want Friends, which I think is a Warner show,
right.
If that's available now on Netflix, it's not going to be there eventually.
Right.
It's going to be on the Warner Media over-the-top network. Part of the HBO equation. So it's really interesting the way this stuff is going to break, and I think what's happening with Netflix is they're looking around saying the pool of content available to me historically is shrinking. What the heck are we going to do when all those Disney movies are gone, when the Star Wars movies are gone, when the Warner content is gone? What are we going to do? Because I'll tell you something, the idea that they're going to fill that funnel purely with a bunch of international offerings produced in foreign countries and dubbed for America, I don't think so, Tom.
No, you're right. But I think they believe, based on, probably a limited track record, that they can go to Hollywood and be a big player, a big content producer. I mean, they recently bought like most of the billboards around Sunset Plaza so that they could showcase all their original shows.
Yeah, I love the fact that anybody who lives in LA or drives to LA knows that if you go to LA, the world of outdoor advertising is a completely different world from any other world of outdoor advertising, except for maybe Times Square, because it appears that the entertainment industry is the most important thing in the world when you look at outdoor in LA. But if you go to Tulsa, good luck finding a billboard,
right,
for an HBO show. You won't find it. So it's a very weird kind of thing that matters only within that closed loop in Los Angeles. Huh?
But that's what they're trying to do, right? They're trying to demonstrate to Hollywood, to LA, to the directors, to the actors, whoever, they're growing industry clout.
And here's the other thing you haven't mentioned. You haven't mentioned our friends at Apple, who just announced recently the Apple over-the-top entertainment streaming platform that's soon to debut. And what they have that nobody else but Amazon has, perhaps, is this built-in, this rich built-in universe of people coming to a platform for a certain thing that can be easily hijacked and bonused to consume this other thing. I think it's going to change dramatically the way people look at these various platforms. And I think it's going to make certain things like, for example, the CBS over-the-top platform, which feels thin to me, even with the presence of Star Trek. It's going to make stuff like that look really thin. It's going to be these so-called skinny bundles are going to look razor thin once you get, Amazon grows to its potential, and things like Apple do likewise. Don't you think?
The Apple thing has got me a little bit confused. I mean, how deeply are they going to go into original content production? I heard they've been running into all kinds of different problems because the different shows that they've been looking at in movies, they don't fit the Apple brand, right? A little of them a little bit too racy or whatever it is. So I don't know. What do you think? Do you think they're going to...
I think they're going to get over that. I think they're going to have to get over that because look at the way Disney gets over that. Disney has plenty of content in its orbit, which isn't, strictly speaking, family.
Sub-brand, so they create a sub-brand.
Sub-brand, but the Apple brand, what does the Apple brand mean?
I don't know. It means whatever Tim Cook wants.
That's the thing I don't understand. The Apple brand, it doesn't mean family to me. I mean, there's all kinds of content, I presume, consumed on Apple devices, which doesn't fit that category.
Right.
So I don't know. I mean, to me, it's a kind of a style. I mean, if you look at the TV spots for the new iPhones, you really have to ask, am I supposed to buy this or have sex with it? I mean, what is the objective here? Is this a piece of technology or am I watching Plenty of Fish? I mean, what is this?
Yeah, I hear you.
All right, Tom. So you are listening Media Unplugged with Tom Asacker and Mark Ramsey. Tom, the question is, can radio survive without passion? Let's back up a step. This is from an article in Radio Inc., written by a guy named Russ Krupnick, managing partner at a company called Music Watch, and he did a survey, and a survey which concluded that among music listeners, radio stations are generally passionless. A few things right up front. First of all, anytime you see surveys referenced thinly, without a lot of details, you have to ask questions. I know this from experience. You have to ask questions like, what is this survey, and how was this survey conducted, and who are these respondents, and how were they gathered, and just how representative is this, and what questions were asked, and how were the questions? All kinds of questions that are not answered here. Okay, so let's start. But if you say a survey with 2,500 music listeners, people say, oh, okay, well, that's obviously representative. It's a lot of people. Not necessarily. So let's leave that aside. So these are people 13 and older who listen to radio, satellite radio, and streaming services, 2,500 music listeners. Now, the first thing you have to say is when he concludes that there's no passion in radio, he's talking about music listeners evaluating music radio. And the premise there is that they're going to evaluate music radio the same way they evaluate Pandora, Apple Music, Spotify, and other things. I would argue that there are reasons why they come to that radio that have not to do with music. That said, music's a big part. he makes the following point. He says entertainment is more than ever about passion. Okay, he's clearly right about that. You would agree, right?
Oh, I'm on the passion bandwagon, trust me.
We're all about passion. We get that. And that's why the central question, can radio survive without passion? Because when you go through the questions that go into the so-called Net Promoter Score, which is a popular measure that, presumably indicates your likelihood to be recommended to others. And, it's not without some controversy, you would acknowledge, right? It's hardly a perfect measure. But the Net Promoter Score for Spotify, Apple Music, Pandora, they're all well above the Net Promoter Score for radio. The numbers, the net numbers, which is, the measures are you a promoter, are you passive, are you a detractor? And I think it's promoter minus detractor comes up with the score. And the Net Promoter Score for Spotify is 73, which is high. 100 is the maximum. 57 for Apple Music, 45 for Pandora, 18 for AM/FM radio. Now, which is, extraordinarily low, and the detractors are just huge. But again, these are people who listen for music. And if you listen for music and you can go to Spotify, well, clearly, it's understandable why that would be preferred over radio.
Well, this is where I have an issue with how the whole article unfolded. He starts out with entertainment is more than ever about passion.
Yes.
I say, okay, that's true. Then he writes, baby boomers, which I'm a baby boomer, had a deep, abiding passion for radio.
That's right.
And then he substantiates that passion for radio. And by radio, he must mean entertainment, because he mixed those two words together.
Right.
By saying that he remembers exactly where he was the first time he heard WLIR play Roxanne, all right, from the Police. Mm-hmm. Look, as a baby boomer, I'm telling you, yes, we had a deep passion for the music of our times. I mean, we were born with rock and roll, the Beatles, the British Invasion. Mm-hmm. And radio is what brought us and connected us to that passion. Mm-hmm. I mean, radio literally educated us. It gave us that value component known as social currency. Mm-hmm. That's the place. There wasn't another place.
Well, that's the key point, right?
Right.
That there was no other place. There's another thing you mentioned, too, that you kind of glossed over, and I thought was going to be your main point. But his point about passion for radio, the very next sentence is, I remember Scott Muni playing full album sides on WNEW. Scott Muni is not music.
Yeah, exactly.
Scott Muni is a personality. So his memory point here is a personality, not the music that, yes, the personality played the music, but his memory point is that this individual was central to the experience.
No, Mark, look, it's like saying, God, I remember I loved mac and cheese when I was a kid. Yeah? Well, who gave it to you? Who gave it to you? My mother. Mm-hmm. So that would you say, oh, I remember my mother made mac and cheese? Of course, because that's who delivered it to you, this thing that you loved. So that's the connection, is the delivery of the value that you're looking for. And in that case, like I said, it was what introduced us to music, what gave us social currency, what taught us, all the things we needed to know when we were having conversations with people about music, and discovery. It was the thing that gave us the discovery.
Right.
And so look, and as far as Net Promoter Score, listen, so you know what Net Promoter Score is, right? It's sure. I recommend something.
Yes.
Why do people recommend things to other people? Because they recently discovered something new that turned them on or improved their life, and that they think, again, they can gain some social currency. So I would say to you, Mark, I found this great restaurant in L.A., and I recommend that to you. What am I going to recommend radio for? Like nobody knows what a radio is?
Well, you might recommend a show on the radio. This is the thing. You're not going to recommend a song, right? If you do, that song is devoid of its context. As you said earlier, it was the only place to get it 40 years ago,
right,
other than a record store. And yes, that's what they were called at that time. And a record store is a lot harder to get to than waiting for that song to come back up in rotation as it would within 2 hours. So I think, nevertheless, I think his point has merit in this regard. It's that the very things that make radio different from the Spotifys, the Pandoras, the Apple Musics, the fact that there are voices on the air, entertainment on the air, there are things on the air. It's not just about being local, because local's just a place unless you create value out of that place.
Right.
It's about what happens that's worth talking about, that's worth sharing. You don't get social security, social currency from the weather forecast, from the news update, right?
Right.
You get social currency because there's something that happens on that station you need to tell someone about. This, my friends, is what's driving podcasts.
Yep.
This is why people are talking about podcasts. This is why those 5-star ratings are being granted to the podcasts that deserve them. That's the reason. And that is generally lacking today because unless you're into non-music radio, sports radio, talk radio, the voices between the records are largely commoditized. They're largely marginalized. There aren't any personalities anymore to a large degree outside of the stray morning show, and even those are very often virtually commoditized, recruited out of the ranks of volunteers. So I think that to a degree, the answer to the question, can radio survive without passion, is yes, as an environmental utility. To the degree, that's like saying, do I like the music when I go walk into CVS? Do I like the radio they have on there in CVS? CVS radio. Yeah, it's okay, right? It's good enough.
Yeah, but you know what, Mark? You and I need to define for anyone listening to this show from the radio industry what passion actually means. It means scarcity. It doesn't mean you're passionate about your radio station.
That's a good point.
It means you have something I can't get anywhere else. That's right. What passion means.
That's right. So, and that invariably is going to come down to something which is yours and yours only, as long as I value it, which is not the latest song from Lady Gaga. Right.
Exactly.
It's going to be the person between the songs. It's going to be something that happens on that radio that's unique and compelling and stands out and is probably entertainment-oriented. And it's not going to be just the fact that you're around the corner from me and I can visit your office and get free tickets from your front desk if I happen to win a contest. That's not enough, because there's 30 radio stations that can do that in your market, maybe more. Yep. So it's an interesting question. I think it's flawed in a lot of ways. Can it survive without passion? And it also is resting too heavily on this notion of music. And fundamentally, the answer is, as I say, yes, I think it can survive without passion. It can survive as a utility where I don't tell anybody about it, Tom. I don't recommend it to a soul, and it's on in the car. It's like it's the paint on the walls. I notice it when I walk into the car and turn the car on. Otherwise, I do not. That is how it can survive. Now, anybody who wants to be in that kind of medium, good luck to you. Because this is why people are talking about Spotify. This is why they're talking about podcasting. And this is why audio is an exciting place right now, because audio is growing on the fringes. It's not growing from the perspective of radio, right?
Exactly.
All right, Tommy, it is time for rants and raves. I feel like we've been doing a lot of that already.
Well, I know it came quick too. All right, well, I'll keep going. So let me give a cautionary rant.
Oh, let's hear it.
And this is for content creators, the radio industry, for anyone hoping to sustain people's fickle attention. Turn that attention into a profitable exchange of value, and bottom line, to stay alive, because today's evolving and highly competitive marketplace demands this. I'll get to the rant by doing a quick quiz. Mark, who am I? I'm the largest retailer in the world. I'm as big as my 3 closest competitors combined. 80% of America shop my stores last year. Mm-hmm. Who am I?
Well, the stores suggest that it's Walmart.
Yeah. Every time I ask that question, everybody says Walmart, and the answer is I'm the mighty Sears Roebuck in 1973. Sears Roebuck was on the cover of every business magazine back in 1973. And now last week, that once dominant idea in corporate culture dragged itself, tail between its legs, into bankruptcy. Mm-hmm. So this inability to evolve, to change its story. Think about it. It erased $30 billion in shareholder wealth from a peak in 2007. Wow. And more than 200,000 people lost their jobs.
Wow.
Now, here's what I think happened. And I want to start by saying I have no problem with understanding the business numbers, the ROI, profitability, all that. No problem. And I don't have any problem with knowing how to do a deal. All right? Mm-hmm. Everybody likes to talk about how good they are at doing deals. Mm-hmm. But this guy, Eddie Lampert, Sears, billionaire majority owner. Mm-hmm. So this is a guy he's a hedge fund manager who once persuaded 4 guys who kidnapped him to let him go. So, yeah, he's good at wheeling and dealing.
He's got skills, yeah.
He's got skills. He could not use his massive wealth, his influence, or his skills at wheeling and dealing to negotiate today's chaotic marketplace. Mm-hmm. He couldn't do it. You know why? No one can. This isn't your father's marketplace, all right? Today's dynamic bazaar is actually quite bizarre. It's moving. The marketplace is what's moving today's economic dance. It's like the ocean waves that move the surfers. If you think that you can fool yourself with the arrogance of your past accomplishments and go out there and make the marketplace bend to your, cleverness, you're out of your mind. So either get humble and start taking dancing lessons, or call your attorneys and have them start preparing the bankruptcy filing. Because the dance is going to get crazier thanks to automation and AI. So I don't know, dance or die. I don't know what you want to call that little segment.
What's so interesting about that is, and your lesson is a profound one for anyone in any established business, right? I mean, in terms of we were just talking about radio. Radio is certainly in that category, right?
Oh yeah.
Dance or die. I mean, let's consider what that means. And invariably, to me, what it means is people need to develop more. These institutions, reflected by people, need to develop more of a tolerance for risk, right?
Oh yeah. Creativity.
And experimentation. Because here's my observation. We can talk about the podcast stuff. As you know, I'm heavily involved with a bunch of different projects in the podcast space. And when you talk to radio people about podcast projects, you get one kind of response. When you talk to podcast people about podcast projects, you get a different response. And it's interesting to me that I think when we first started Inside Psycho, the first one in the series, I can't imagine a single radio company getting behind that and saying, yes, this is a good idea. We will fund this. Let's do this. And I still think it's true today that to take a similar project, equally as risky, I guess you could say, and present it to any one of these broadcasters, with the possible exception of those that are heavily invested now in the podcast space, I think still it would be a tough go, and yet. And I hear it now because, when we talk with people about some of the shows that are out there, the questions are, well, how do we monetize that? What is its monetization potential? And it's like that's so putting the cart before the horse. Not that we need to be blind to all that, but that's why to me the podcast space is so much more like independent film than it is like radio. You're creating these projects. You're hoping they touch as many people as they can, and then you're putting it out there into the marketplace and hoping for the best. And
that's not just podcasting, man. That's what I'm trying to tell you. That's the nature of the marketplace today. Mm-hmm. If you think you can sit down today, come up with some ideas, create some 5 to 10 year plan that shows how that grows and monetizes, you are out of your mind.
Yeah. Yeah.
Stuff is moving too fast to be able to do that.
So that means that the advantage is going to be for people who have a tolerance for risk, who can spot ideas which turn out to be promising, not spot promising ideas.
Oh, no, that's a different thing, right? Exactly.
But spot ideas which in retrospect are promising,
right?
Which is a hard skill. But that's what needs to be nurtured. That's what needs to be nurtured across all these platforms, right? Whether you're in publishing, whether you're in television, whether you're in film, whether you're in radio, no matter where, right?
Yeah, listen, you could own a restaurant. If you're not changing up the menu, you're in trouble. Because people are opening up around you all the time to try to take away those people with something more novel and more valuable. That's the nature of what's going on today.
That's why
who's
I say
willing to do it.
These broadcasters who say that what we need to relax more ownership rules so that company X can own more radio stations in market Y in order to compete against Facebook and Google, et cetera. And I keep thinking, well, how will doubling down on more sticks, more towers, solve the problems that you're facing with regard to people who are selling things which are not you and getting customers which are not yours?
Right.
It doesn't altogether make sense. Anyway, that isn't even my rant.
Oh, you got another one?
I didn't know that was one until we got to the end of it. And here we are, 30 minutes. Oh, dear.
Oh,
okay.
God.
So let me try and go through these pretty quick. But first a rant and then a couple of quick raves. This is, I saw this, I don't know where this is from actually, but I'm glad I don't because it's from Mashable of all places.
Uh-oh.
Because Mashable invests a lot of time in a lot of junk. Here's the headline. Want to be the next podcasting sensation? This online class can get you started.
Oh, here we go again.
Who doesn't want that, Tom? So I'm going to read some of this to you because it's hilarious. There's never been a better time to get into podcasting. It's cheap, it's relatively easy, and the market for the content is huge. Oh, but that's not all, Tom. Odds are you have at least one friend with a show, so why not add your voice to the mix?
Oh, man.
So it's a podcasting 101 bundle to help you launch your show right away, even if you've never even recorded so much as a voicemail message. So listen to all this that you get. This is 10 courses, 35 hours of training, the basics of audio and video recording, strategies for recording your own voice, and even instruction on how to breathe correctly. You'll get tips on voice acting in case you're going to do a voice acting. Maybe I should listen to that. But here's the best part. This is where the value is. You're always talking value, Tom. That's your problem. You're always talking about value. The Podcasting 101 bundle normally retails for, guess what? Guess how much?
$15,000.
You're not supposed to go higher.
I don't know.
$1,990. But Tom, for a limited time only, you can get lifetime access for guess how much?
$49.
Wrong. $29. $1,990 worth of value for $29. Tom, call this number right away. 1-800 Podcasting 101. Anyway, I just found that to be extraordinary that the pitch would be that brazen. The value proposition would be that obviously bogus, et cetera, et cetera. So that's my rant. Any comment on that before I move on?
That's sad.
All right, two things, and I guess I got to log
Plus,
roll
what's
a
the
little
URL?
bit.
I might take a look at
No,
it.
I'm not even
I'm
gonna give it
kidding.
to you.
I'm kidding.
So first, I'm going to do a little log rolling. I was really pleased to see that our little podcast, Jeff Schmitz and my podcast with Wandry, Inside Jaws, was nominated by iHeartRadio as one of the, I guess, it's nominated for a podcast award, a Best Podcast Award, whatever they call it, iHeart Podcast Award, in the category of entertainment with 5 other shows that are not ours. So I was really excited to see that because, they could literally pull from anything, and here they had pulled our little show that we did with Wondery, and we're really, really proud of that. So for anyone who's inclined, this is one of those things where the nomination you can't influence. You can only influence who wins, and the way to influence who wins is to literally vote through social media every single day. Not my preferred way of winning anything. Not necessarily a hallmark of quality. But nevertheless, for anybody so inclined, go to iHeartPodcast.com and place your vote for Inside Jaws. And Tom, I know you already did.
I've already done it. Yeah,
I appreciate
do
it.
it.
But you have to do it every day. I need to remind you this. Every day for like the next 2 months.
I have it in my phone. It reminds me every day.
Yeah, it's great. Isn't that a wonderful burden? Couple of quick raves. One is there's this. I just got this note today. Maybe you got this. The masterclass, folks. Are you on the list for masterclass? Did you see this thing today? David Axelrod and Karl Rove are doing a masterclass together on political strategy.
You have got to be kidding me.
Isn't that amazing? I mean, I just thought that whole concept is just fabulous to have those two guys doing it together on opposite sides of the political spectrum is just cool. It's the kind of thing you tell others about which means it evokes passion, which means it gets a high net promoter score from me.
Which means it's scarce.
It's scarce. Isn't it scarce, though? Yes. Here's the other thing I want to the last one I have to mention. You know, there's a lot of stuff on Netflix to watch. We talked about that already. There's something that my wife and I happened on a while ago, just in time for Halloween, called The Haunting of Hill House, based on loosely, I might add, based on the novel by Shirley Jackson, who is an alma mater of my high school, by the way.
Oh, wow.
I directed one of her one acts when I was in high school, well after she graduated and died, I might add, just so that's clear. But The Haunting of Hill House is absolutely one of the best horror things I've ever seen on television, if not the best horror thing I've ever seen on television. It's that good. It's just really, really well done. It's really dense. It's really thoughtful. It's really scary. And there are I repeat, no jump scares. There are no fake scares in this series. And if there's anything I hate, it's when you open the refrigerator door, you close it, the cat jumps out, there's a big loud song, big loud music crescendo, and you're supposed to be terrified. I hate that. I hate anything that involves the refrigerator door in horror movies. So there's no refrigerator door anywhere in The Haunting of Hill House, so I strongly recommend it.
All right.
All right, well, that's Media Unplugged for this week. Sorry we ran a little long. Please remember to subscribe to us at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, or whatever new platform is creating podcasts today, wherever you're listening right now. You can follow Tom on Twitter at Tom Asacker and Mark at Mark Ramsey Media. Send us your questions and comments using hashtag Media Unplugged. Feel free to email us. If there's a media topic you want us to cover, tweet us. Our emails, mramsey at markramseymedia.com and tomasacker@gmail.com. Catch up on older episodes at our website, mediaunplugged.net, because old doesn't mean stale, Tom.
That's right.
Old can also be fresh.
It can be old and scarce.
It can be old and scarce. Again, the refrigerator door analogy. Anything that's in the refrigerator old is not good, but that's not true of us. Special thanks to the producer of Media Unplugged, Jeff Schmidt. Exciting audio from media. Jeff is amazing. You can find him at jeff-schmidt.com. For the one and only Tom Asacker, I'm Mark Ramsey. Thank you for listening.